Okay, so I'm going to monitor the waiting room as folks might still come in. And I will monitor the chat as well to moderate questions that you might have. But hopefully everyone can see the screen that I'm sharing that has a brief bio of Roger Hoverson, who is our special guest today, NSU alum, and we're glad to have him back. And beyond the short bio that you see here on the screen, I'll allow him to give a little more insight into his background and what he's been working on and that kind of thing. We have roughly 45 minutes together here, and then hopefully we'll have some time to interject some questions. We are recording this session and we will release it as a live stream later. I believe that comes on Monday. So if you'd like to tune in for that as well, for a reprisal of this conversation, you can do that as well. So everybody give a warm welcome to Roger Hoverson.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and I am going to, let's see here. I have a presentation for you. Perfect. Okay, so as Dr. Wall said, I graduated from NSU in 2015. I'm a flutist and I'm finishing up my master's at the University of North Texas. And I study with Mary Karen Clardy. Right now, I'm a flute teacher and a Pilates instructor, and I'm finishing up an assistantship with the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health, which is the website that you saw my bio on. So some of the work that I've done in the last year was related to health education in middle and high schools, whether it's choir, band, or orchestra programs. So in Texas, we have what's called the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or TEKS for short. Basically, they're learning outcomes. Every school has them, every university, it's built into the curriculum. So these TEKS adopted musicians' health topics in the 2015-16 school year. So I was awarded a grant with my colleague and friend Megan Taylor last year to help sort of facilitate music educators in middle school and high school talking to their students about these topics. So the list of topics that I'm going to be discussing today is basically from that work that I did last year. So these topics include musculoskeletal health, hydration, hygiene, hearing health, vocal health, and mental health. The first 5 on the list are what is currently in the TEKS for Texas middle school and high school music classes. We've added mental health because, as I'm sure we're all aware, musicians have a unique set of challenges when it comes to our own mental health and being performers all the time, that kind of thing. So anxiety can play into that, and we'll talk about that later. So that's where this list comes from. So the first one on this list is musculoskeletal health. And I bet probably a lot of you have heard that musicians are athletes before. So that's a pretty common statement that I heard growing up. And while we are athletic, we probably all don't need to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger to practice our instrument or sing, right? So we use our small muscle groups. So the first point is that musicians are small muscle athletes. I'm a flutist, so really I use muscles in my hands primarily and in my face. I don't really have to do like squats to like play my flute really well. So now that brings up the next point, which is endurance. So the smaller the muscles are, the more endurance that they need, right? Because they're being used a lot quicker, a lot more repetitions, so they need to have a lot of endurance. Same thing for singers too, because the vocal folds are extremely small tissues in the body that also need endurance as well, especially for singing. You know, I know things are different now, but when things were maybe a little bit more normal, sometimes singers are in rehearsal for hours and hours at a time, and that can take a toll. So related to these two concepts, I wanted to bring up the theory of injury causation. So it's a three-legged stool, and basically the first one is force, second one is posture, and the third one is repetition. This applies to singers and instrumentalists as well. So if I'm a flutist, there's a certain number of force on my hands and on my face to, you know, when I hold the instrument. The posture is how I hold the instrument. The repetition is how many times I do it, right? And if you're a singer, maybe it's your posture is like, what is your head doing? What's your shoulders doing? How many times are you holding your head like that or holding your shoulders like that? So if one of these three is imbalanced, or two of these three are imbalanced, or all three are kind of out of whack, it can, it has the potential to create an injury, right? And so what we want to do is make sure that these are balanced. And then the next point comes into play, which is the time to fatigue scale. So say you wake up in the morning, and or maybe if you're a singer, it's like the afternoon or evening, and you know you're practicing and you feel really at ease, right? You're like, I am fresh, I had my coffee, I got 8 hours of sleep, I've had breakfast, I'm good to go. Start practicing. Maybe after 20 minutes or maybe after 2 hours, everyone's a little bit different, we start to get a little bit tired, right? And sometimes we say, okay, well, we're just, you know, gonna keep going. Then our muscles get a little bit tense. And we're like, I got stuff to do, I've got to practice this, we're gonna keep going. So then after we get past some tension, maybe pain starts to creep in. And then once you get to the level of pain, your muscles basically fail to stop working. It's like your body's just like, nope, we're not gonna do that anymore. I'm gonna tell you I can't do it anymore. So this is where the role of breaks come into play, because you start out fresh, maybe you start getting tired, maybe you go a little past that and you say, whoa, I gotta take a break, okay? If you take a break, your body immediately starts to bounce back toward the place of ease, right? So, and everyone is different, every body is different. So it could be different for you. In fact, it probably will be different from you than it is for me. I like to practice probably like 20 minutes at a time, or maybe 30 minutes, and then I got to take a couple minutes off. And I can tell because maybe my focus starts changing, or my hand is like, oh, you need to change that position a little bit, okay? Some people, maybe they can go 2 hours in practice and they're fine. That's great. So what you want to do is find your limit where you start to feel tired, and then you take a break, and then you bounce back. That doesn't mean that's the only time you get to do that though. So I'm not condoning practice for 20 minutes and then you're done for the day. You can repeat that process as many times as you feel good, right? If you start to get tense, maybe pain happens, you take a longer break, okay? So the next point is rest and total rest, because I can take a break from practicing my flute, and I can say, wow, you know, I practice scales for like 20 minutes, my fingers need a break. And then I go, okay, well, I'm just gonna check my email and check, oh, I've got a call, I'm gonna text that. I'm using my hands still, right? I'm not like giving my hands the break that they need. I'm still using it. Or how many of you have been in a choir rehearsal and you're singing, and then you take a break and you go out in the hall and you immediately gab with your friends for like 15 minutes. I did it too. I was in choir. So the same thing happens, but we got to take that break. So there's rest, which is the time away from your practice activity. And then there's total rest where you're not doing anything at all related to the activity. You're not using the same muscles, you're not talking, you just get a break. So the next point is there are some recommendations, right? Because we want to make sure, actually, let me double check one more thing. Okay, perfect. So we want to make sure that, you know, our muscles are staying healthy, we're feeling good, and we want to build endurance. So how to build endurance is you have consistent practice with adequate rest. So it's like going to the gym basically, but for the small muscles. So practice for 20 minutes or an hour, or find your limit, and then you take a break and you do it again, and you keep doing that. And eventually maybe you can go 5 minutes longer, 10 minutes longer. So you can increase the amount of time that you're able to work before you need a break, just like lifting weights. The warm up and the cool down. This is really interesting because in athletics, they have discovered that warm up and cool down have really different goals. A warm up is something you do to get your mind ready to accomplish what you need to accomplish. So maybe for me, it's like I have two exercises that I like to start my flute practice with, because it helps me focus on telling my body what I need to do for that practice session. Then at the end of the practice session, you do a cool down, and that's more for your body. So the warm up has to do with getting mentally prepared, and then the cool down, you get to do a stretch or maybe take a nap, or, you know, do something else that makes your body feel good after you practice. So not all pain is necessarily bad pain. Just like going to the gym, if you are increasing your endurance or increasing your capacity to load your body, you might get a little sore, right? So if you are used to practicing for 30 minutes at a time before you take a break, and you say, wow, I want to practice 40 minutes at a time before I take a break, your body is probably going to be a little bit extra tired. You just increased your, your practice session by 30%. So that's okay. And then there's a different kind of pain. Maybe you feel a pinching somewhere, or you feel like a stabbing or a burning or a throbbing. That's a kind of pain that's a little bit more serious. And it could be an indicator that something needs to be taken care of, right? Outside of rest. So that brings up the next point. If you are experiencing pain that doesn't go away after adequate rest, that might be time to see a healthcare professional. This is a wonderful time to bring up something that I totally forgot at the beginning. I'm not giving you any medical advice at all. So I'm definitely not a doctor. I have no healthcare professional background. So these are bits and pieces that we have researched and we're applying, right? So now that that's out of the way, the fifth thing you can do is cross-train your body. So again, we're small muscle athletes, so they need endurance, but there are large muscles in the body that can also work and help us to be more efficient, so that the smaller muscles are not overworked, right? So this could be anything. I like Pilates. You could do yoga or run or weightlift or Tai Chi, anything you like, but it's helpful because it kind of helps balance out the body, right? Back to the theory of injury causation, it can help your posture and the forces in your body be more efficient, okay? So I'm going to talk about hydration next. This is also really important, especially if you've ever worked out before and you have not been hydrated. Your body starts to cramp up real fast. So this is really important for a number of reasons. You can see 55 to 75% is the first point. You may have heard this already before, but our bodies are made up of 55 to 75% water. And as we age, the number starts to go down. So the older we get, the more we need to pay attention to how well we are hydrated as well. Thirst is a wonderful indicator because if you are thirsty, that means that your body is already experiencing a water deficiency. So that's like, you got to get some water now. Dehydration impairs your physical performance. So they have studied athletes, and we know that when athletes work out a lot, they can lose a lot of their body weight, like in water, like they can lose a lot of water weight. But dehydration can start to impair physical performance with as little as 2% dehydration. So it doesn't take a lot before it really starts to affect you. It also impairs your cognitive function. So if you're not hydrated, you can experience a loss of concentration or mood swings. It can contribute to headaches. It affects your kidney function, the volume of your blood. So it's really a whole body thing when it comes to hydration. Okay, so how much water should you drink a day to stay hydrated? There's not one answer because every body is different, everyone's size is different, we all metabolize things differently. But a good rule of thumb is that age-old 8 glasses of water a day, right? Personally, I feel really good when I have 80 to 100 ounces of water. So 64 ounces just kind of doesn't quite cut it for me, but it might be different. So there are three things you can do though to make sure that you're hydrated. And number one, maybe a little bit gross, but check the color of your urine when you do go to the bathroom. The paler it is, the more hydrated you are. The darker it is, the less hydrated you are. Check the frequency. How often are you going to the bathroom? People, when they go on hiking trails, like really long hiking trails, that's actually one way they check their hydration level. They're like, if I've gone to the bathroom enough times today, that means that their hydration levels are staying safe. If they're like, oh, I haven't gone to the bathroom in 8 hours and I don't need to, maybe that's an indicator that your body is asking for a little bit more water as well. And then something that I like to do is I just have a water bottle and I can sort of count my ounces that way. So if I have a 32-ounce water bottle, I go, okay, well, I need to have 2.5 of those and I'll feel good. So that's just a really easy way to make sure that you're staying hydrated. And when you're hydrated, your muscles are much happier. They work a lot better as well. So the next thing I'm going to discuss is hygiene. Specifically, this research that I've looked at deals with instrumentalists, which is really fascinating. There's a study I looked at that examined the relationship between instruments and microbial contamination, and all of the previously played instruments in this study harbored viable bacteria, mold, and or yeast. And reeded instruments in that study carried a higher microbial load than the flutes and the trumpets. And then instruments tested within 3 days of being played still had mouth flora on the instrument. So that's a pretty good amount of contamination on our instruments. There was another study that looked at instruments and fungal contamination, and in almost every wind instrument there was fungi on it, and the musicians had a significant sensitization to it. So that means that they were kind of being affected by the fungus that was on their instrument. And the main risk factor for fungal contamination was a failure to dry the instrument after it was being played. So what's interesting though is that after, or about 3 days after being played, the bacteria starts to go away. But during that time, the potential for the fungi to grow goes up, for fungi and yeast actually. So just because it's been a little while doesn't mean that there's nothing on your instrument still. So super simple causes though. Irregular cleaning of your instrument, irregular drying of your instrument. And if we have any double reed players with us that have the little cup of water with them, if that water is not changed regularly, stuff starts to grow in there as well. So fortunately, the age of the reed and your saliva is not what's causing this. So you don't have to worry about that. And these are really practical ways that we can avoid microbial and fungal contamination. So you wipe down your instrument after you use it. You dry your instrument as well as you can after you use it. And you change your reed water. And then this link here that I have posted, and I have the link available if you want to write that down. This takes you to a page of the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health that my colleague Megan Taylor was the project manager on. And at the end of the school year, when the schools were trying to figure out how to get instruments either back from the students into the school or get the instruments back, you know, changing, basically getting the instruments out of the school or taking them back in. They wanted to make sure that the instruments were clean because, you know, we're in this pandemic, right? So the school district reached out to UNT and they came up with a game plan for how to sanitize the instruments. So if you're interested in finding out what you can do to sanitize your instrument, this link will also take you to that page and you can check it out. Okay, moving on to hearing health. So I remember it was my first year at NSU, so quite a while back. Right at the beginning of the semester, we had a little talking to about hearing health and about how to make sure that we were taking care of ourselves while we're practicing, while we're playing, etc. And that's about, and I don't want to say it, but about 10 years ago is when this happened. That was my first year in my undergrad. So that's when musicians really started kind of paying attention to their hearing health in a much more broad way, we could say. So what we have learned in the last little bit is that prevention is really essential when it comes to protecting your hearing health. Ears are wonderful and they bounce back. Think about that like time to fatigue scale from earlier. It's like they start out great, they get a little tired, maybe they're not working so well and then something bad happens. They can bounce back, that's fine. But after so much damage has been done, we can't really replace it, or they can't replenish themselves, so to speak. So ears, we've also learned, are amplification devices. That might sound kind of like, I thought that, but what they've done is they've studied, they've taken a sound measurement outside of our ear, and it's given one number, and then they take a sound measurement from inside the ear, and the sound inside the ear is louder than the sound outside the ear. So we're taking in sound and making it louder so that we can interpret it more efficiently. So just a couple of quick definitions here. A decibel is a unit that's used to measure this intensity of the sound, right? And dBLEQ is something that's very important when it comes to hearing health. So dB stands for decibel, and the dBLEQ is basically a number that is the average of the sound intensity over time. So it's not a one-time thing, it's giving you an average of what the sound intensity would be. So a dosimeter is a device that they use to take these measurements. They can take a they can measure how high a decibel is, or what decibel of level of any sound, and then it can also give you the dBLEQ, which would be the average of that over time. The last thing I want to mention first is 3 kHz in speech. So 3 kHz is in the upper octaves of the piano somewhere, and that, or the part of the ear that registers 3 kHz, is the part of our ear that also interprets consonants. So it also happens to be the part of the ear that wears out the fastest. So the reason this is important is maybe our ear, that part of our ear, say, is damaged. We have no trouble hearing the volume of things, but we lose the ability to clearly understand speech because the consonants themselves become kind of muddy. So imagine that if you're listening to a singer or you are a singer and all of a sudden you're not quite clearly hearing the way you're speaking anymore. It can be really challenging, right? So this image here is, it's in two halves, and you can see the top half. There are 3 rows of hair cells. They're really uniform. They look all the same shape, pretty much. They're all present and accounted for. They look great. The bottom half is what hair cells look like when they've been damaged, right? So some of them are missing. They're not all the same shape anymore. They look really ragged. So the hair cells are also what are responsible for taking the signal of the sound energy and interpreting it before it goes to the brain. So that's part of our system, our hearing system, that we really want to stay as healthy as possible, right? So why am I giving all these random definitions and talking about this? And I want to lead this with a question. I'll keep kind of going a little bit, keep you in the dark a little bit longer. What is the difference, do you think? You can ask yourself this question, take a second to think about it. What's the difference between music making and factory noise? Imagine yourself in a factory and you're working and there's a bunch of noise around you. And now think about yourself as a musician and you're making music. And just think about what's different between those two situations. So on the one hand, if you're in a factory, the noise is just constant. You're around a machine that's literally like making noise all the time. And if you're a musician, where there are lots more variables, right? There's a dynamic variable, there may be a textural variable. So the sound is getting quiet, getting soft, getting loud again. It's fluctuating all the time. It also never lasts probably 8 hours a day, although there is one pianist who I think he performed a bunch of Beethoven sonatas all like in one day or something like that on like a live stream. So maybe you do make music for that long, but most of us don't. Most of us have just maybe a rehearsal or a practice session. So we're making music a couple hours a day, we're done until the next day. So hearing health and hearing health standards were developed by NIOSH and OSHA, which are organizations that basically research and enforce protections for employees, right? They researched and found that 85 decibels, LEQ, is the limit for what a person should be subjected to in the workplace for 8 hours a day and 5 days a week over the course of a career. Okay, because and I bet you're all like, what is 85 dBq anyway? Or what is 85 dB? So everyone, we're all muted except for me. So I want you all to just go, ah, like that. It can be an ugly sound. Just go, ah. That's about 85 decibels. It's not really loud, is it? It's pretty kind of quiet. I mean, I could get out my flute and play something much louder than that very quickly. But imagine if you were in a place where you had around for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Yeah, that might kind of wear your ears out, right? Over probably not too much time, actually. It's not that great. So when it comes to hearing health, a while ago, everyone thought, okay, well, 85 decibels is the limit then. We should not go above that. We should not be around that. That's not really the case. We can be around sounds louder than that. we're just not supposed to be around that level of sound 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So because it's not just how loud the sound is that's important, it's how long you're around the sound. And what's interesting is that if you are around a loud sound, which we all are for various reasons, your ears get tired in over a short amount of time, but they bounce back with rest. So we actually have, there's a fancy term for it, but it basically means short-term hearing loss. So say you're listening to the car on the radio and you, at the end of the day, maybe you had a rehearsal and everything and you've got like your car radio on, you're driving home listening to music and you're like, okay, this is fine. You get in your car the next morning and you turn on the radio and all of a sudden it seems so loud. And you're like, wow, why is it so loud all of a sudden? I was just listening to it last night. Probably the night before, your ears were a little tired, so you turned it up. And then you get in the car the next day and you're like, ears are back to normal, they're fresh. They're like, well, we don't need that. So like I said earlier with our muscles, again, our hearing starts to bounce back as long as there's not any really permanent damage done. Okay, so and one of the main differences between music making and factory noise is dynamics, right? So we are always fluctuating the tone, and so there's a good part of every rehearsal where probably we're so below any risk whatsoever. But we just want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and not exposing ourselves to super loud sounds for a long period of time. Okay, so what can we do about this? Oh, actually, we're not to that slide yet. This is about earplugs. So earplugs, musicians' earplugs were designed for musicians, and they claim to reduce our the decibel level, right? So they're saying we're going to reduce the sound energy if you're wearing your earplugs. But what's interesting is that the company that makes these only tests higher frequencies when it comes to their earplugs. So they test from about middle C on the piano and several other spots above it, and they never test any low frequencies, which if you're in marching band or wind ensemble or something else, or even in choir, everyone loves all of that bass energy, right? We're like, we need more tuba or the trombone or whatever. They're like, piccolo, can you please back off? Please don't do that. Sopranos, can you please back off, right? So we want a lot of low energy, but the musicians' earplugs are not even testing those levels when they are designing them for us. They're also, like I said, they're designed with a factory type of noise in mind, not a musician type of noise. And lastly, the company that holds the patent for these musicians' earplugs used to have a contract with the government and the military, and the military found out that they weren't doing what they said they did, so they got in trouble. You can Google that. I'm not going to say anything else about it, but you can Google it. It happened in 2018. It was a big deal. So what can you do? You want to avoid loud situations for an extended period of time. And if you are around a loud situation, just get adequate rest between it. You know, give yourself time. And like I said, you want that total rest, right? So go to a loud event, maybe don't put in your earbuds on the way home. You know, just give them a break. And if you do need earplugs, it's probably best to just wear a pair of foam earplugs, and that should mitigate the risk. Okay, I'm on to vocal health. Now, I'm going to keep this super simple because it is really simple. The musicians and music educators are, whether you're a singer or not, are professional voice users. And you're like, what does that mean? Well, I'm a flutist, but I'm here giving a presentation. I have to use my voice for an hour, right? Or if you're teaching a class, you're teaching students, you're using your voice quite a bit. So whether you're an instrumentalist or a singer, vocal health is really important to you. So everyone, can you put your hands up, whether you're on video or not, you can do it, I don't mind, but I want you to put your palms together here. And I want you to take the pinkies away, and then the hands away, then your thumbs, and then your pinkies kind of come back together, and just do this little wave. Did you all know, other than Dr. Wall, that that's what your vocal folds do? That's what they look like. They just do it at like hummingbird wing rate. They oscillate, they come together, they go away very, very quickly. So quickly that you have to have a camera slow down to like actually see it happen. They're just like, woo, really fast. So that's what happens. The breath comes up through it and it oscillates the vocal folds and they move together really quickly. Now take your hands again and rub them together really fast for like 5 seconds. And now, do you feel like really warm and kind of like, whoa, what just happened, right? So if your vocal folds are, because they're moving so quickly, they need a lot of lubrication, right? They're covered with mucus and so that they can move very quickly. If they get a little dehydrated and then they rub together, that's kind of what happens to the vocal folds. Now, if you did this for like 5 minutes, you probably might already start getting a blister, right? So imagine what vocal folds, which are really tiny, they're about that long. They vary from, you know, male to female, but you know, they're very tiny. So they need to have endurance and they need to be hydrated, right? So symptoms can be so varied. I don't want to get into the weeds, but a vocal issue could present itself with something as simple as a raspy voice or a hoarse voice, or it could go all the way to where you can't even speak anymore, right? But the thing is, vocal folds don't have nerve endings, so we can't really feel when something's going on. So we kind of have to be proactive about it. So what can we do? You can be hydrated. They need to be hydrated to move well and efficient. We can also avoid using vocal fry, which is not great. And if you're like, what is vocal fry? Imagine kind of like Kim Kardashian voice, where you're just down here and it's a little grating. Sounds a little different, right? You don't really want to grate your voice like that. The other thing is you can take a full breath, because like I said a moment ago, the breath is what starts to oscillate. So if you have enough air going through, it keeps them moving happily. And then just like with hearing health and with musculoskeletal health, they need rest, which includes sleep, and they need total rest, where you have enough time where you're not making any sound at all with your vocal folds, okay? So quickly onto mental health. I know we're running short on time, but this won't take too long. So I wanted to mention music performance anxiety, because we all have it in varying levels. And if you don't have it, you might be lying. So we all struggle with it in different ways, okay? So anxiety is just a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. So that's like every performance ever, every lesson ever, every rehearsal ever. That's just, we're like not really sure what's going to happen. So anxiety is very common, right? There are 3 things that have an effect on this though. Number 1 is your preparedness. Number 2 is your self-confidence. And number 3 is your self-esteem. So there are lots of variables that we can totally not control at all. I remember one of my last years at NSU, I was performing in the auditorium for a production of Mozart. I was playing with like the pit orchestra, and the heating just went out. We did 2 performances in there anyway, and it was literally like 60 degrees while I was trying to play in there. So there's just so much that we cannot, like, we have zero control over it. But these 3 things are things that we can control. So we have to take care of ourselves. So here's something that you can do in your practice room to help build up your confidence. You may have heard of SMART goals before. This is a wonderful way to organize your practice session. SMART's an acronym, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So imagine you have a recital coming up, or a performance or a rehearsal, and you say, okay, I've got to work on this. So you want to make sure that what you're going to work on is specific. Be so specific. It could be one measure, it could be one rhythm, 2 measures. Make a very specific piece that you want to practice on. Make it measurable. So give yourself, say, okay, am I going to play this with perfect rhythm this time? Is my articulation going to be perfect? Is my vibrato going to be perfect on this, or something? Maybe not perfect, that's not a great word, but give yourself accuracy, maybe accurate rhythm. That's something you can measure. You can turn on your metronome, go for it. Is this attainable? This also comes back to specificity. You want to make sure that it's one thing at a time. So measure your rhythm, measure your vibrato, or measure your intonation, but don't do it all at once. Just take one thing at a time. Is this relevant? Make sure that you're working on what you need to work on. If you have a recital and you have 5 pieces down or to work on, and you know 4 of them really well, you better work on the 5th one, right? Don't spend time on the other 4. Is this time bound? That you got it. If it's a recital, we have a deadline, right? I have a recital next semester, so I have a deadline. I've got to work on my repertoire. So this is very applicable. There are some recommendations I have for your self-esteem, because your self-confidence is how you feel about the work that you're doing. Your self-esteem has to do with what you feel about yourself. And we got to pay attention to both, right? So number 1 is be aware of the story that you're telling yourself. When you're practicing, if you make a mistake, are you immediately beating yourself up and saying, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. That was so stupid, blah, 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 blah. And then it just like runs away. Or can you say, whoa, I made a mistake, but I don't think I'm stupid. Like I can make a mistake and I'm not all those negative things. So be aware of what you're telling yourself, what words you're using inside your head. And when you realize that, you can choose to believe that or not, right? If it's a story in your head, you get to choose whether you believe it or not. So if I make a mistake and I say, wow, that was really stupid, that you idiot. And then I say, whoa, who are you calling an idiot? And then I can say, well, I'm not an idiot at all. I have like a 4.0 almost, and I have done all these different things. I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to believe that, right? Then you can trust or treat yourself like your best friend. So if you have, if you would probably never say certain things to yourself, you would never say certain things to your friend that we tell ourselves, right? So make sure that when you're practicing, you're really kind and generous and patient. Okay, so maintaining your baseline is like one of my biggest beliefs when it comes to musculoskeletal, vocal, hearing health, hydration, hygiene. Everything is better when your baseline is in place. So what is your baseline? I think it is sleep. If you are not well rested, nothing works. You have to be hydrated, because if, like I said earlier, if you're not hydrated, it affects your entire body. It affects your ability to process and critical think, and it also affects your ability to be patient with yourself. So that's very important. And when it comes to your diet, I don't mean it has to be a specific diet. It means that you should be eating food that make your body feel good. Eating foods that make your body feel good. So whatever that is, just take care of it. Enjoy it. Move your body a little bit. It keeps your muscles working happy. It keeps them working well. It helps you balance your force and your posture. So important. And then the last thing I think is your awareness. And this kind of comes back from the mental health piece a second ago, is just be aware of what you're telling yourself. And then when you're aware of it, you can choose to say nicer things to yourself, right? Which is what we need and what we want. So the last thing is just, if you have any other questions or you want to do some research on your own and you're not sure where to go, PubMed.gov is a wonderful online resource that you probably have the first two of these through your library at the university. So they probably have a subscription to these services. PubMed is a list of abstracts. So basically abstracts for any journal articles about any health topic you can imagine. And then if you want, you have the option to get the article. So if you're looking about any health topic, you can search for some work that's been done there. Medlineplus.gov is basically, this gives you kind of like a Cliff Notes version of any medical thing that you can think of. This is what doctors print out and hand to their patients in the doctor's office. So basically doctors just kind of put condensed versions of pieces of information to be available to you. The National Network of Libraries of Medicine is a branch of the National Institutes of Health, and one of their goals is to facilitate healthcare or health education to the public. So they also have wonderful resources. You can, like I said before, you can get a lot of these things through your library. And if you have any questions about what I talked about, you could also reach out to some experts themselves at the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health as well. So thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to share this with you. And if you have any questions, whether I know the answer or not, I could probably point you in the right direction. And it doesn't also have to happen right now. If you think of a question in a week or whatever, Dr. Wall has my email address. So, you know, this doesn't have to be the only time you ask questions as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Roger, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And if everybody could give him a virtual round of applause, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry
Thank
that
you
we
so
weren't
much
able
for
to
having
come
me.
onto campus as we intended, but you know, these are the days and times that we live in, of course. And
I understand.
but we're glad to have you at least virtually, and we look forward to some future collaboration and hopefully some questions coming your way and more info.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe and take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
So much. Have a good one.